It's Solving Your Driver Problem, where we bring guests who have real proven strategies that just plain work for driver recruiting, compliance, training, and retention. But today we're not focused on the driver problem. We're focused on a human trafficking problem. And unfortunately, it's a problem that sits in the background and one we want to bring to the forefront today. So we've been partnering with Truckers Against Trafficking for a couple of years. Our guest today is Laura Cyrus. She's the Director of Corporate Engagement. Hey, Laura. Welcome to the show. So today we just want to get everyone aware of the program. How can they get involved and share a couple success stories? And so for those who don't know, Truckers Against Trafficking is on a mission to help raise up a mobile army of transportation professionals to help disrupt trafficking networks. And it makes sense. Our truckers, our bus operators, they're the ones out on the road. They're the ones that are in the field seeing this. And together, so far, if I'm correct, we've identified over 1,200 victims of human trafficking. Correct, Laura?
Over 1,300 now, but yeah. Yep.
Awesome. We can't keep up.
Yep.
So truly amazing work. And how we met, well, first off, was met at a show in Canada. So you all are getting international work. Shout out to my buddy Kim Richardson, who made the introduction. And then a few months later, here we are at Coach USA's annual conference, and we see a story of two Clevelanders earning the Harriet Tubman Award. Do you mind starting off there, Laura, and tell us about that story?
Yeah, so a great example of this work in action, and again, just another, another impact success story. So Laren was the bus driver for Lakefront Lines, which is a Coach USA company. And they had been trained in the anti-trafficking training that we produce called Busing on the Lookout, industry-specific bus training. And, you know, he was driving and there was a woman on his bus that came up and essentially let him know that she was in trouble, that she was being exploited, that her person that was exploiting her was on the bus with them, and that she was desperate and in need of help. And so Laren, quick thinking, kind of pulled the bus over to the side of the road and sort of, there was some kind of, faking of a mechanical issue or something where he was able to call his safety director, Lauren, and she, walked him through, what was happening. Let's get the police on the phone. Let's call some people to get them dispatched out to where the bus was, literally on the side of the highway. Law enforcement shows up, is able to separate that woman and take into custody that trafficker. And it was his quick thinking, Laren's quick thinking that I think just really goes to show when people are in the right place at the right time, which is more often than a lot of people think, and they've had this education, they have this awareness, they are able to, put this into action and save and change lives. And it was so cool. So a couple years ago, I was able to go to our Harriet Tubman Award Gala, which is sponsored by Protective Insurance down in the Indianapolis area. And I was able to present our Harriet Tubman Award to Laren and Lauren. I got to meet them, got to hear the story and just learn more about them and their families. And it's just, kind of we know that people don't do this work to get awards, right? They do it because it's the right thing to do. And we all have the opportunity to make an impact. But it was really cool just to be able to see that, to celebrate this success in action, to celebrate their good work and quick thinking. And of course, we know that there's millions more people that are out there on the front lines, whether it's in the bus industry, trucking, energy. And again, with just the right education and taking the time to take that second look and to think about what's going on, again, these people are able to change lives. And it's really encouraging. It's fun to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laren said, the training caused him to be aware that this was an issue. Yeah. And he went right back thinking to his daughter. And that really pushed him to think quick. And yeah, he was creative, but he totally, credited the training just to be aware and actually be thinking about it. Because I think that's how we started this, right? Is many people just don't even know that how wide of a problem this is.
Yeah.
And so awareness really is the first step.
Yep.
And that's why we're here today, right? That's your job, is to spread the word. and we'd love to be able to help in that effort. But do you mind just taking a step back here and just tell us, how did you become involved with Truckers Against Trafficking?
Yeah, that's an interesting story too. So I am from Michigan originally and did my undergrad degree at Michigan State University. I was studying criminal justice and women's studies as a focused concentration. And in my coursework, I didn't hear anything about human trafficking throughout all of my criminal justice coursework. It wasn't until I went my senior year, I went and heard a missionary speak actually on the topic of human trafficking. And she was referencing her work in an organization overseas and kind of thinking, more globally, explaining more globally about the issue. But she kind of brought it back home, so to speak, to the US and referenced a case out of California. This was probably 20 plus years ago, where there was a sweatshop in California found to be using forced labor trafficking victims making these garments. And some of those garments, they ended up in many different places, but one of the places they ended up were major department stores in the United States. And at the time, again, I was a senior, I was getting ready to graduate, and I had just purchased 2 dresses to go on interviews with from a major department store in the US. And I was just struck by a weight and a conviction of thinking, how have I never previously considered who makes my clothing, or who produces my coffee or my chocolate or the rubber in my tires or any of these other things, right? We don't think about that a lot of times until we're presented with truth and the issue of this. And so that night, truly, I was, for lack of a better word, really called to do something in the anti-trafficking movement. I just thought, this is horrendous. I need to be a part of something that helps fight against this. And I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like. So flash forward a few months, I graduated from college. I did not get a job in my field because it was right when the economy tanked and we had the recession. And I spent some time kind of gaining what I thought was sort of some random business experience, which ended up serving me really well. I don't believe in coincidences. And worked for a couple of years and just thought, I'm doing okay with what I'm doing, and it's kind of fun and it's enjoyable, but I really want to do something that's making more of an impact. And so I started researching different graduate programs, and I came upon a program at the University of Denver in Colorado that was a Master's of International Human Rights with a specific concentration in forced labor and human trafficking. And I just thought, you know what? If I can get into this program, I'm sure I can do something good with this degree. Wasn't exactly sure, I didn't have any sort of international human rights or international studies background whatsoever, but decided, hey, I'm going to apply and just see what happens. And I got in, went and did the program. And it was during my time in graduate school that I applied for an internship with Truckers Against Trafficking, or TAT. And I applied for that internship, met with our executive director, and the rest is really history. I'm grateful to have turned that internship into a job, and then a full-time job. And now 8+ years later, I'm still here. And again, really grateful to be a part of this work.
8 years is a long time. You're a seasoned vet now. But we said a couple of times, Laura, that this is a problem that many people aren't aware of, right? It took an article for you to even realize it. How big is this problem?
Yeah, so we know that when we talk about the scope of human trafficking globally, there are estimated to be 40 million victims worldwide, and those victims are generating, unfortunately, $150 billion a year in illicit profits for their traffickers. So we know this is happening on a global scale, but here, kind of drilling down into North America and even into the US, we know that our partners at the National Human Trafficking Hotline report that trafficking is taking place in every single state. We like to say there is no zip code that is immune from this crime. Certainly, while we know there are plenty of adult victims, men and women, again, in forced labor and forced sexual exploitation or sex trafficking, we know thousands of kids here in the US are at risk for being prostituted each year. And, when we're drilling down even more, we talk a lot about vulnerabilities and different ways that marginalized groups are more affected by this crime. But we know that there is inherent racism in prostitution and thus also in sex trafficking. So disproportionately, victims of human trafficking are women and girls of color, and disproportionately the buyers of those women and girls are white men. So this is just one of the many factors that go into this. Again, this crime knows no racial, gender, or socioeconomic bounds. But as we're thinking about vulnerable populations, this inherent racism plays into this, and sort of the misunderstanding of prostitution is another one of those key pieces. We also know from our partners at the National Hotline that victims of human trafficking may be forced to have sex up to 20 times a day. And really, when we're sharing this information in a presentation, we say this statistic up here on the screen really should say raped up to 20 times a day, because that's what this is. And a lot of times, we know that I think that the statistics kind of vary between 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women in their lifetime will be a victim of sexual assault. There's a really great chance that everybody listening to this today knows somebody that has been a victim of assault, whether it's a friend, a family member, a colleague, right? I don't think it's just like cancer these days. I don't think any of us are really immune from knowing somebody that's had some kind of experience. And so we like to say, as hard as it is to think about, imagine that one person that and what that one incident did to shatter that person's sense of security, sense of self-worth, just how much it takes to overcome that kind of a situation in life, and how much of an effort it takes every day. Now imagine if that was happening to that person or love once a day, or 5 times a day, or 20 times a day. That is the level of trauma that these victims of trafficking are having to endure. And that's really why we do this work.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, unimaginable situations. So to change that, why are trucking and bus companies in such a good position to do that? How can they help?
Yeah, this is, I think, I get goosebumps. Again, been doing this work for 8 years, but this is why I'm so passionate about it. We like to say, not everybody is in a position to make an impact. We all have a role to play, every single one of us, no matter what industry you're in. We all can play a role in helping to combat trafficking, but people in transportation through this program are in a great position. We know that this crime is in proximity to these industries. We know truck drivers are seeing this at rest areas, truck stops, hotels, motels, even places where they're delivering their load. We've had another one of our Harriet Tubman Award winners, Arian Taylor, was delivering a load at 3:30 in the morning. He was waiting, which I know this is common for folks in the industry, right? He was waiting to be able to unload, and he was in this industrial area, again, 3:30 in the morning, and he got a knock on the door by a young woman that had no shoes, no cell phone, no identification. She had a trash bag full of her belongings. She was dumped there in the middle of nowhere by her would-be trafficker. She had just literally fought him off, and she was desperate for help. Arian knew what to do. He looked at that TAT decal that was on his window and said, we need to call the hotline. And so they called the hotline together. They dispatched a prepaid cab to take that woman to a local shelter that the hotline helped to secure a place for her that night. And then the next day she was on a train back home to Colorado. And I say this because, again, these people, truckers, bus drivers, energy workers, they are in places that traffickers are exploiting their victims. And that's what we have to help educate people on. Traffickers are going to count on all of us, you, me, people in these industries, everybody, thinking that that person being sold is, right, just a prostitute, and that we're not going to care enough to get involved, or that we're not going to know what could really be going on. And so just by having some education, by understanding the signs, the 2 most obvious signs are anytime you see a minor that you believe is engaged in commercial sex, or anytime that you believe you're witnessing someone under the control of a pimp, regardless of the age or gender of that victim. Those are huge red flags. And a great thing to do at that point is to call the national hotline. I will say the number, it's 1-888 888. And there people can speak to a trained operator who will help them kind of walk through that situation, understand if that is trafficking or not. If it is, they will either relay that information to local law enforcement or ask the caller to hang up and call 911 and, explain, hey, this is where I'm at. I think it's trafficking for these X, Y, and Z reasons. Please send someone out here to investigate. And yeah, what we're finding, again, this program works. Over 1,300 victims identified by the trucking industry alone. That's just calls to the hotline. That doesn't count non-emergency or local 911 calls that have been made. So these men and women are in a position to make an impact. And what we have found, and over my 8 years, talking to thousands of drivers at different industry events, these men and women, right, consider themselves knights of the road. They would give you the shirt off their back. They would help anybody. And if we can just help people understand sort of the nuances of this, what this looks like and what to do, we have found, and the data shows that they're willing to get involved and help be somebody that can make an impact.
Very powerful. So we've got some good success stories that we've talked about. Some of the initiatives on the train, which we can dive in here in a second, but maybe what's the hardest part about this? What's the biggest challenge about getting the messaging out in this industry?
Yeah, I think there's a few challenges. The first is the subject matter. This is not, it's not typical safety training, right? That folks are used to getting. It's not a cozy, fun subject to think about or to learn about. And so I think there is sometimes some apprehension on, oh, that seems pretty dark and heavy. I'm not sure I really want to, get into that. So we do combat that somewhat. Also just time. We know time is money in the industry, and sometimes there can be objections to adding even more training for drivers, but we've really helped to sort of push those obstacles aside by making this training free, making it less than 30 minutes to get done, and making it industry specific and professionally created. So for anybody that's seen any of our training material, that this is it's good stuff. It's packed with information, useful information and data, and it is heavy and it is sensitive. But what we're finding is everybody's got kids or nieces or nephews or grandkids, or they just care about the community that they live in, even if they don't have kids. Once people are confronted with this and the reality of this crime, and that they can do something as simple as making a call to make a difference, most people are pretty apt to get involved. I would say the only other sort of challenge is combating disinformation. A lot of times we've all probably seen the movie Taken, right? It's a very Hollywood dramatized version. Certainly kidnapping does constitute a percentage of cases of human trafficking, but more often than not, a victim knows their trafficker, whether that's a family member, a friend of the family, or somebody that has groomed that victim over, social media or even in person over the period of weeks or months, gaining that person's trust. And so we do combat misinformation a lot in that, I'm never going to tell somebody not to be aware of their situation or their surroundings, but it's a disservice to what trafficking does actually look like for people to get really tightly wound up and sort of rabid about, hey, watch out for the supermarket at exit, whatever. I saw some traffickers that were in there. They were following me around and being weird. That could happen. I'm not saying that type of situation would never happen or hasn't happened. But when we get these social media frenzies on like all of these myths of what trafficking looks like, we're not teaching people what it actually is, and that you do need to be aware of the people that are in your life or in your children's life or who they're talking to online, all these things, right? It's not as cut and dry as, oh, somebody is going to, try to abduct my child. Again, it can happen. Be safe, but combating misinformation, I think, is one of the other things that we're up against. And again, why this training is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I know our staff, when we found out we're doing this partnership, really jumped on it and wanted to push it and was passionate about telling our customers about it. And many of them said, well, yeah, right. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Didn't know about it, and it is good content. And so we do make it available to all of our customers who subscribe to our learning management system. We'll make it available for a link here in the notes for anyone to jump in and take, because we just believe in it. And from what I'm hearing on these stories, it just seems like a little bit of education. You said your biggest challenge is the misinformation. Just a little bit of education of how does it happen and what to do really goes a million miles.
Yeah.
Just a quick technical question for everybody. You mentioned the hotline, which you've got down by heart. Did you also mention law enforcement? When do you do which one, and how is law enforcement involved? What's that partnership look like?
Yeah, great question. So we would advise anyone, anytime you believe you're witnessing like an emergency crime in progress, please call 911. We're not asking drivers to intervene or wrestle away victims, right? We're really wanting people to make a call. If you're not sure if it's an emergency situation, or if you're not sure that it's human trafficking, that's the time to call the hotline and really kind of walk through that situation, tell them what you're seeing, and help you make that decision. Our partnership with law enforcement is pretty fantastic. It's one of our main goals is to partner and facilitate the investigation of human trafficking with law enforcement and other government agencies that we work with. And one of the main ways that we do that is through a 4-hour in-depth law enforcement training, which is really meant to educate law enforcement on the issue of human trafficking and societal attitudes that contribute, again, to the misunderstanding of prostitution, as well as focusing on the victim-centered approach, which law enforcement officers can use when they are doing interdiction stops or when they're doing inspection stops, when they believe they may be coming into contact with a victim, how to have that victim-centered approach and support someone as a victim of a crime instead of as a perpetrator of a crime, right? And these are aided by one of 3 amazing survivor leaders that we have on our staff. They will share their experience and their perspective on their interactions with law enforcement and what they have encountered. We also work pretty extensively with MVE, or motor vehicle enforcement, across the nation through our Iowa MVE model, which was co-created with the Iowa MVE. And it really seeks to leverage the networks and the influence that MVE officers and organizations have, both in training their own people on understanding this, but then helping those folks go out and be either internal, training their peers, or external, being able to do awareness events or to just spread the word to the drivers that they end up working with every day about TAT and the realities of human trafficking. So we also have a law enforcement training video, which anybody is welcome to watch. It's on our webpage. Another great example of just professional material and good information for anybody. But yes, we're grateful for the ways that law enforcement has supported this work.
So an obvious partnership for that. Part of this, I mean, you mentioned earlier with the story of Coach USA and Lauren that, people don't do these things, for the awards. But it's part of this. We're celebrating because it's
Absolutely.
For the awareness factor, right? And so that others in the company and the industry know. On a similar vein, do you mind sharing a little detail about some details on the Freedom Drivers Project?
Yeah, so this is a great program that we have, which is one of the more tangible things that TAT has. We don't have a brick and mortar building. We don't have an office. We all work independently, across the country. But our Freedom Drivers Project is a 48-foot renovated show trailer, and it is essentially a mobile museum on human trafficking. And inside of that exhibit, you walk in, and there's like a 90-second video that you watch that kind of gives you some basic understanding of human trafficking and how it intersects with transportation. And then as you make your way through the trailer, you walk through, and on the walls, we have artifacts that were donated to us by survivors of human trafficking that help to tell the story, the push and pull factors of how these people ended up in this situation. And so, for example, we have one woman's prescription pill bottle, another woman's cell phone, shoes, and a dress that one woman was forced to wear during her time of exploitation. Just a number of different artifacts, and again, bits and pieces of real life stories that really help bring this whole issue kind of down and humanize it, and have folks both in the industry and outside of the industry understand how this crime can happen. And we take this exhibit to major trucking events, to law enforcement conferences, to college campuses. It's been to the national capital. It's been so many different places, again, both in and outside of the trucking and transportation industries. And it's really a fantastic tool, again, just to kind of bring it down and let you be face to face with real stories of people that have endured this, but also have become survivors, and come out of this as well.
So an excellent way just to spread the word. So as we start to wrap up the conversation, how can people get involved? How can people, listeners out there, how can they help?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say take the training, whether that's on your platform or on our website or however else they're able to get their hands on it. Watch that video, start there. Then please check out all of the resources that we have on our site, both additional training videos, as well as just different case studies and success stories and all those things that we have to share. But then to really get involved, please spread the word. What other drivers can you share this with? What other safety directors or company owners can you share this with? What other industry associations are you maybe a part of that you can spread the word about this effort? Ultimately, we want more people to be trained so that more calls can be made, so that more people can be identified and recovered out of this. And there are ways to volunteer with us if that's something that interests you. A super easy thing to do that I'd love to plug is everybody lives in a school district, and whether your kids, right now in COVID times are physically going back to school or not, everybody lives in a school district, and most of those districts have school buses. Can you, as a concerned citizen or a concerned parent, write a letter to either your superintendent or your safety transportation professional within your district and say, hey, has our district ever been made aware of this busing on the lookout training that's specific to school bus drivers? I'd love to see our bus drivers trained on this issue. That would be a fantastic way to help. And it's super easy. We have a kit, and I can maybe get you a link to this or a file.
Yeah.
We have a toolkit that makes it super easy. There's a template email, kind of tells you what you need to do. There's an attachment. You can attach this flyer on the training right to that email and send it, or you can print and mail those in. But we've tried to make it really easy for folks to spread the word that way. Otherwise, I would say just continue to educate everybody about the realities of trafficking, that this is taking place in the US, and that there is something that they can do about it. They can be part of this effort as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we certainly believe in it. We see the numbers, hear the stories, we know it's working. Laura, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's making an impact out there. And as a part of the impact, I asked this question to everybody that's on the show, and yours I'm very interested in. So would you mind wrapping up by telling us kind of what's the accomplishment you've had in your career that you're most proud of, and why?
Yeah, I really had to think about this question, and I will try to make it through this without crying. But I think it's just about being a part of a ripple effect, something that is greater than myself. I mentioned that I have met thousands of drivers over the course of my time, and I'm grateful to call a small handful of them friends. And I'll try and make this quick, but I have one driver in particular that had a really interesting experience before he ever knew about TAT. Had an experience with someone that was a minor, a trafficking victim, most likely. And before he was trained, he had a very sort of rude and abrupt interaction with that person and just told them to get away, leave me alone. I don't want anything that you're trying to engage in. And he talks about just this look of deadness that was in this young person's eyes. And at the time, he was upset because he was woken up. Anyway, he went back to bed, whatever. Years pass. He learns about TAT. He realizes what had happened and how he could have helped. And he has said, from now on, for the rest of my life, I will educate people about this because it is happening and we are in a place to make an impact. And now it's my duty to go out and to tell people. And for me personally, I think about, I know it's kind of cliche, but I just think about what one little pebble in a still body of water can do and how those ripples just go out and out and out, truly infinitely. And I will never know, our staff, people that listen to this, that get involved, we will never know, right? The true and total impact of this work and the things that we've done, whether it's about trafficking or any other sort of deed or kind thing that we do in the world. We're never going to know, and that's okay. I don't need to know. All I need to know is that I'm showing up every day to try to make an impact, to be a part of something that's doing good and helping people. And this work has led to those heart and mind changes, like that driver I just mentioned, right? He's changed forever, and more people will be changed forever because of how he's been changed. And that's what's just so fun to be a part of this. So I think that's probably my greatest accomplishment, and the thing I'm the most proud of is just being a part of this work and helping people get engaged.
You absolutely should be proud of the work you're doing, Laura. It's important stuff. It's life-changing stuff. I don't even have words for what to describe what that would be like. So thank you for the work you're doing. We're humbled just to be a small part of the effort. And so we'll make all the resources that you mentioned available in our summary of this on our site, so anyone can download, get an example of how they can make these courses available to their companies. And so one more time, Laura, just want to thank you for jumping on, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having us, and thanks for being a great partner. We're really grateful. Thank you.